to get on some questions about vision and so on, but of all the things you did in the Senate, the things people are going to remember is your clash with Jesse Helms. And I'm curious as to how you came across this little item in legislation, and it had to be small and innocuous appearing. How did you come across that, and when did you make up a decision, I'm going to do something about this? This is his attempt to protect the patent that the Daughters of the Confederacy have on the symbol of the Confederacy, not the flag, but the symbol. How did you see that, and how did you decide what to do?
Well, you know, this again may sound corny. I was just doing my job. It came up first in committee. My staffer, you know, we reviewed the bills. My staffer's name was Jeff Gibbs. He's a lawyer out in California now. And we're going over the bills that were coming up, and he's rattling off da-da-da-da-da. And he said, but Senator, he says, this patent for Olestra, you know, the fat drug, the fat substitute, this patent for Olestra has a Confederate flag attached to it. I'm going, what? You know, how did this happen? And we found that the Confederate flag patent that had been held by the United Daughters of the Confederacy had actually been renewed twice before. They'd had it since the 1920s. And I'm saying to myself, you know, then I went into my lawyer mode. What do they need a patent for on the flag? I mean, you know, that's you think in terms of copyright, if anything, but not a patent. Well, so I went to the chairman of the committee and I said, well, you know, this part is not acceptable. I mean, you know, number one, I mean, the Confederate flag doesn't belong on a bill. It doesn't belong with a patent to begin with. Second, it doesn't belong on this bill. And third, you know, I cannot in conscience support it, and I'd like your help in opposing it. And the chairman, who actually has been very good on issues of race ever since, as far as I'm aware, started going humming and shifting in his chair, and I couldn't figure out why. You know, it was just such a no-brainer to me. Like, oh, you know, why is this complicated for you? Well, it turned out that it was complicated in part because it was Strom's bill.
Helms' bill.
It was Strom's
bill.
Strom's bill.
And Jesse Helms is carrying it for him?
Jesse Helms had nothing to do with it at this point. That was another piece of the whole thing. It was Strom's bill. And the other members of the committee, since he was senior and I'm, you know, just got there, didn't want to offend him. So I actually had to lobby it in committee. And I lobbied, I talked to all the members, I got my votes lined up, and I won. We stripped it off the bill in committee. And I thought that was the end of it. Then on a day, again, back to race again, we were in committee on the confirmation hearings for Justice Breyer. And Orrin Hatch, who actually on a personal level I got along with very well, started arguing against, the issue came up about freedom of choice. And Orrin began to make the argument that Roe v. Wade, the decision on choice, was the legal equivalent of Plessy versus Ferguson. Now you may have heard that since, but at the time I was absolutely shocked. Plessy, you know, Plessy being the decision that a black man has no rights, that a white man need respect. So I'm sitting there going, what? I was just absolutely horrified that he would say such a thing. But then I was really nervous because I'm thinking, okay, I'm a freshman on the committee. This is one of my first Supreme Court justice confirmations. This is a big deal. It's on television. Oh my God. And so, but I just couldn't let it pass. And I said, you know, point of clarification, and I got into a legal discussion, an argument with Orrin Hatch about whether Roe v. Wade and Plessy versus Ferguson were comparable. And trying to keep my voice modulated, because I was really, I mean, infuriated and insulted. So I'm going through this and I'm really nervous, and in the middle of this, Mike Stafford and Jeff Gibbs again came over with a note that said, Jesse Helms has just taken to the floor to revive the Confederate flag patent. And I sat there thinking at that moment, I'll never forget, I said, what did I do today to deserve this? I mean, it's like, Lord, what did I do to deserve this day? So I had to get up, leave the hearing, and go across the street, you know, go over to the Capitol to take on Jesse Helms. And if you review the proceedings at all, the first part of my argument on the floor was really as dispassionate and as legalistic and formalistic as I could make it. It was, you know, Mr. Speaker, this has already been decided by committee, it came off, da 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 da. I mean, it was just a legal argument, thinking that the rules would apply. You know, the committee's already decided this. It'll, you know, for Jesse Helms to come back and try to revive it was just out of form. And then that it shouldn't be a patent in any event. And I mean, again, I would boop, 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 hear the argument. And when I looked up and the Senate had voted to restore the patent, I was incensed. It was like, oh no, this can't be. And that's when the if you will, the real debate. And when Paul Simon and Joe Biden and some of the others, particularly Joe, because Joe was on the committee and had known the issue. So when the committee members first came around, Pat Leahy, when they started coming around to say, this is why the committee decided, and then the debate broadened from just a purely legalistic one into the import, the meaning of the Confederate flag in modern day America. And when, by the time, how can I blank on his name? Judge from Alabama.
On Sessions?
No, before Sessions. We used to call him Judge. And that's all that's coming to my mind. I'll think of it in a minute. But by the time he got up and said, my grandfather was a general in the Confederate Army.
Heflin.
Hal Heflin, right. Howard Heflin.
When
Judge Heflin got up and said, my grandfather was a general in the Confederate Army, and we're proud of our Confederate heritage, but this symbol has no place in in society today, because it inflames passions and reminds African, Black Americans of their pain. And when he did that, I think he must have brought a whole, to the extent that we had Southern support at all, he was really the logjam, the emotional logjam breaker in all of that. And that's how it was. I mean, the Senate, we wound up winning 78, 70, I don't know what the vote exactly, but it was better than 70 votes.